The Book of Nehemiah sits near the end of the Old Testament historical record as a dense, fast-paced narrative of decisive leadership. This photograph captures the massive scale of Jerusalem's old stone walls and towers. The text documents an impossible architectural feat. A royal cupbearer abandons the comfort of the Persian palace, travels to a ruined city, and coordinates the reconstruction of these massive defensive structures in exactly 52 days. Modern readers frequently isolate this achievement, stripping it for parts to build corporate management seminars or personal productivity frameworks. Applying the text strictly as a secular leadership manual removes its theological weight. The historical events recorded here serve a precise redemptive purpose. The text divides into two distinct architectural phases. Chapters 1 through 7 document the physical rebuilding of stone walls. Chapters 7 through 13 document an attempt at the spiritual renewing of human hearts. Despite completing the physical construction and launching a massive community revival, the narrative collapses. It closes on a deeply sobering note, with the protagonist offering a desperate prayer of failure. This incomplete work was a strict redemptive necessity. It preserved the Jewish people in the land, while its ultimate failure proves the necessity of the coming new covenant. Watch this transition. We begin with the ruined physical walls of ancient Jerusalem, which then fade directly into a blueprint of the cross. Mapping this structural layout shows us how the historical record operates as a direct shadow of the coming Messiah. This is the Cyrus cylinder, a physical record of Persian imperial decrees. In 445 BC, the Jewish exiles lived under the absolute control of the Persian Empire and King Artaxerxes I. Look at this carved figure in a sunlit ancient Persian doorway. Nehemiah inhabited this scale of royal grandeur as the king's cupbearer. This was a highly trusted advisory position with direct, daily access to the emperor. When Artaxerxes grants permission to rebuild Jerusalem, Nehemiah explicitly credits the good hand of my God. He attributes his success to divine orchestration, ignoring his own political proximity. God uses a pagan emperor, the absolute ruler of the known world, to actively authorize, supply, and fund the fortification of a conquered vassal state. Divine providence actively directs the political decisions of global empires to secure specific covenant promises. This map traces the arduous route from Susa to Jerusalem. Without defensive walls, the city existed in absolute vulnerability. Nehemiah engineered a community-wide construction effort, assigning priests and merchants to specific boundaries. Workers faced relentless opposition as regional governors deployed conspiracies and military threats. Nehemiah responded by arming the builders. The community stood on the rubble with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other, synthesizing practical defense with reliance on God. This image shows the excavated broad stone wall foundations in Jerusalem. The physical reality of this ancient construction project concluded miraculously. The entire perimeter was secured in 52 days. This physical boundary was a theological necessity. Without distinct defensible borders, the fragile Jewish community would have assimilated into surrounding pagan cultures and vanished entirely from redemptive history. The narrative pivots sharply in Chapter 8. A secured perimeter offers no real protection if the population inside the walls remains spiritually dead. This animation depicts an ancient parchment scroll unrolling across a rough table. The entire community gathers at the water gate, where Ezra the priest reads the strict demands of the law of Moses. The public reaction is profound. The people weep under the conviction of the text and immediately transition into obedience by celebrating the prescribed Feast of Booths. They execute a formal covenant renewal ceremony, confessing their historical sins and swearing a solemn, binding oath to walk strictly in God's law. The revival establishes a core theological premise. True restoration requires bringing the community into direct, active submission to the Word of God. Physical safety is insufficient. Tracking the timeline, Year 1 marks covenant renewal. A 20-year gap occurs before Nehemiah returns. He discovers the community abandoned the Sabbath for economic gain. Tithes are abandoned, priests work fields, and people resume pagan intermarriage. The ultimate insult. Their enemy, Tobiah, is given living space inside the actual temple courts. This exposes a terrifying reality regarding human nature. The community possessed perfect defensive walls, proper priestly liturgy, and a freshly sworn covenant, yet they instantly collapsed back into total depravity. Nehemiah responds with visceral, physical confrontation. He rebukes the civic leaders, curses the offenders, and violently pulls the hair from the men who compromised the lineage. The historical account does not end with a victory parade. It closes abruptly with Nehemiah offering a desperate, humble plea for God to simply remember his efforts with mercy. We are left with a stark contrast. The 52-day engineering project was an absolute success. The 20-year spiritual project was a complete failure. The text forces a strict theological deduction. External boundaries, physical barriers, and the application of human willpower are entirely incapable of curing internal human depravity. If spiritual reforms were destined to collapse, we must ask why God commanded and orchestrated this specific rebuilding project in the first place. This flowchart connects Artaxerxes' decree directly to the prophetic timeline of Daniel's 70 weeks. The imperial order to rebuild Jerusalem's walls triggered the exact chronological countdown to the Messiah. By forcing strict physical separation and raising the city from the rubble, Nehemiah preserved the distinct geographic community and the specific genetic lineage required for the Messiah's arrival. Without this provisional earthly construction project, there would have been no distinct surviving nation of Israel for Jesus to be born into. Nehemiah's historical work operates as a shadow pointing to a greater reality. He restored a physical temple operated by failing, daily serving priests. Jesus arrives as the ultimate high priest, offering a single, final sacrifice for sin. Look at this ethereal blueprint of a perfect geometric city descending into view. Nehemiah rebuilt temporary, decaying walls, but Christ constructs the eternal New Jerusalem. Through the new covenant promised in Jeremiah 31, Christ accomplishes exactly what Nehemiah could not. He writes God's law directly onto human hearts, bypassing the weakness of stone tablets and oaths. Our hope cannot rest in our own willpower, earthly structures, or capable human leaders. True restoration relies entirely on Christ's finished work, the greater builder who permanently rebuilds broken lives.